22/8/12/21.
Make a motion, second is read.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to accept the warrant and payroll register as read. Any questions? Seeing none, all those in favor? All in favor, the motion carries. Acceptance of the meeting minutes from July 26, 2021.
Move to accept.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve, to accept the meeting minutes of July 26, 2021. Any questions? Seeing none, all those in favor? All in favor? Motion carries. Old business, Mr. Gokin?
None.
Samantha? Mrs. Boyle? Mr. Moody?
None, sir.
All right, items of communication. Mr. Town Manager?
All right, just a couple of things to pass along to you. Tax liens were issued today for unpaid 2020 property taxes. Just by comparison, last year we liened about 200 properties, which is about average. This year, the economy's been good, people have been paying, we only sent out 113 tax liens this year, so that number's down significantly. At the last meeting in July, you remember, there was a resident here from East Madison Road concerned about what he thought might be gray water running from his neighbor's property to his property. I just wanted to give you an update on that. We had Brent Lawson, who is the state's plumbing inspector, come and visit both properties. He was able to talk with both property owners, take a look at the situation. He put a dye into the system on the property in question, and that dye would run through their septic system, and if there was a problem, that dye would show up on the neighbor's property within 7 to 10 days. So Leo Mayo, our code officer, plumbing inspector, went and did an inspection today, and today was the 10th day after that had been done, and there was no visible signs of any dye. So I have a copy of Leo's report. I think I emailed a copy to you folks today, and I also emailed both of the property owners. And the gentleman that was here at the last meeting sharing his concern thanked us for doing the follow-through. And so that's where that situation lies. I think the town's work is done unless something else develops in that situation. You have members of the planning board here tonight. I just forgot to mention that they have begun work on their update to the comprehensive plan. The last plan was updated in 2014. A lot has changed since then. So a series of public meetings will be scheduled over the fall and the winter as they update parts of that plan. I'd just like to thank the folks that helped pull together a smaller but still enjoyable Madison Anson Days over the weekend. I think there was success for both communities. Steve Austin, Robin Turek, Tammy Murray over in Anson, they did a good job pulling all these events together. So that's all I have.
All right, new business. Number one, I'd like to open a public hearing on the remote meeting policy for the select board and the planning board. The public hearing will now be open.
So if I might just make a couple of comments, and then we'll see if there's any further comments from folks. The reason I asked Mr. Vinziano to combine both public hearings is both the planning board and the select board need a public hearing to enact this policy, and with the difference of the names at the back, the both policies are pretty much identical. They allow for remote participation in meetings by board members, staff, and the public. Kind of like what we've been doing for most of the last year and a half. The only difference is that being in public is expected. In other words, if a body can meet together in person, that's the expected way of doing business. One of the questions that I was doing some research in today is who determines, and maybe this is a point of discussion that you'd like to have, who determines when there is an urgent situation that would require a remote meeting or the majority of the participants to go remote? If you look at the wording of our policy, it simply says, the circumstances in which a physical presence for one or more members is not practical shall include the existence of an emergency or urgent issues that require the public body to meet by remote standards. Now, the rest of it talks about some of the specifics of one person wants to be out and the others are in person. But I think members of the planning board have brought this up because with the rise in cases and whatnot in COVID in our county and in the state, is that enough to justify an entity like the select board or the planning board to go back into a fully remote situation? What I think is really interesting about these two dynamics is the select board has met mostly in person through this period. The planning board has met mostly remotely through this period. So I think you've got different vantage points coming to this, and I'd like to be able to have options for both in the same policy. So that's my setup to see if there's any further questions or comments.
I think that we have followed the guidelines that have been set forth to us right from the beginning. So I mean, if we have those guidelines set forth again, then we would restructure and do, I mean, we stopped meeting early on, correct? If I remember right. So we had guidelines that we came down from the state that we followed. And so I mean, I don't know any other reason except for when one person is going to be absent to watch, to go come in remote, right? Does that make sense?
The only difference is during the governor's state of emergency, she was able to mandate certain things, such as mask wearing and so forth. And during that state of emergency, you had the leeway to hold fully remote meetings. So when the legislature changed that, they gave that authority to the municipalities to determine. And so, looking at our policy, I don't think we would have to wait until the governor issued another state of emergency to allow a board to go remote, as long as it's done for a reason and not for convenience. I think that's the straight-face test that the legislature is looking for, is as long as you're going back to a Zoom meeting for a reason of public safety and concern, that's one thing. If you're going back to Zoom meetings just because it's more convenient for you, then the legislature didn't allow for that in the statute.
So who's going to make that call?
Well, that's what we're talking about. Do you want to leave that up to each individual board? In this case, it would be the select board and the planning board. That's kind of how the wording reads right now.
But you're gonna have to, if that board can't meet to make that determination, then you're gonna have to have some mechanism that indicates that we're gonna go remote, right?
I guess why wouldn't we wait for a state declaration or even a county declaration, and then everyone in the county in uniform, if this, like this county, the COVID rate is shooting up, if it gets too severe, why get something from the county? That everybody, every town in the county would do the same, the same rules.
This only applies to selectmen and the planning board, is the only board that's involved?
So each board would have to either opt in to what the select board establishes, or they could establish their own. And so, but the only other boards that really would be impacted by this would be the budget advisory board that meets only once or twice a year, and the appeals board if they had to appeal a decision by the planning board. The reason we're dealing with these two is they're the ones that are meeting regularly right now. Do you have any comments, Mary?
Sure, I just gave the comments that I made previously. My concern is, yes, things had begun to improve, we thought, and we have, science has revealed a lot more, we have learned a lot more since a few months ago, and that we are now meeting in a place where not everyone is masked. We have learned that people who are vaccinated can carry the same viral load as those who are infected and unvaccinated. and therefore we put each other at risk every time we meet. We all have exposure to different people. We never know if we are carrying the virus that we could spread to others in the room. And therefore, I think that as a separate entity, as a planning board, we should be able to make that decision to meet remotely out of the interest of public health. This is the county that has the lowest vaccination rate in the state.
So I guess my question, to go back to it, how do we determine that? I mean, right now, we say, we put something in here, maybe we do a straw poll at our, we call on the phone, do a straw poll with 5 people sitting here? So, I mean, how are you going to do that? How would we do that?
So each individual meeting still has to be posted.
Right.
And I'll use the planning board for an example, because this is what kind of led to this discussion. If the planning board, or the chair of the planning board decides that 7 days out, the county is still at a moderate transmission level, a high transmission, substantial transmission level. Maybe we'll use that as the guideline, because that's the best guidance we have at the moment. So, and everybody's in agreement not to meet in person, and everybody's capable of meeting by Zoom, which we certainly are. Then that would be a decision that is made by the planning board.
That comes down to the chairman of the board being the person who is going to make that determination.
Yes, it's technically their meeting, right?
I didn't read that in here, but.
No, it's not in there specifically, so.
So, I mean, because, I mean, I could say, Bob comes in remote, and I could say, well, he's just doing it because they don't want to come to the meeting. I mean, that's really fair of me to say that, right? I mean, I don't want to get to that point, but, you know, yeah.
I think we're making this too confusing for something that should be relatively simple. I think any board that's under this policy, there is enough common sense in these boards that if the chairman thinks and talks with the town manager that we should be going remote, do it. We did it the last time and it worked. So if it comes up that we need to do it, fine, we'll just make a decision to do it. If the planning board wants to be stricter or looser, they can do the same thing. But I think there's enough common sense amongst us. We've already been through it and we've got an example to go by. I think it's a pretty simple solution, that if push comes to shove, just say, okay, we're going to remote, and send us a message.
So one of the things that was recommended today is, and this is really just good policy, when you do have a meeting and people participate remotely, it should indicate in the minutes a general reason why that person was remote. Could be that they were feeling ill, they didn't feel safe traveling, whatnot. And this would also allow for people to participate in meetings who are not in the state. Because if they're on vacation or if they're traveling to see family, they can still participate and be part of a quorum. So for those reasons, the policy is helpful. The thing I point to at the bottom of each of the policies, it simply says it may be amended by the board, whether it's select board or planning board, based on the provisions in state law. So again, kind of another reason to have these policies separated for the planning board and the select board. If they, through experience, find certain ways that they can make these better, there are ways that this allows them to do that. Just stepping back a little bit, when the governor's state of emergency ended, she gave until the end of July for people to finish up their remote meetings as they had been doing them underneath the state of emergency. After July, you have to have some sort of policy in place to allow remote access to meetings, whether everybody meets remotely or they allow people to come and comment from Zoom or so forth. So until that's in place, we don't have any, participation from people that just want to zoom in like they've been accustomed to for the last year and a half. So the process tonight is, this is kind of the next to last step. You have this public hearing, you take input. If this board is satisfied, they can vote and sign and kind of put into place this policy. And then we can make these decisions as we go forward to determine whether or not by common sense we'll have a meeting or allow for some people to come in. Back to your case saying one person just wants to zoom in and you say, oh, they're being lazy. Well, that person has to give a reason why they're not attending in person.
I mean, if there's somebody that calls a meeting, then that's fine. I mean, if it's the chairman of the board, they're the ones that are saying it will be remote, then that's, I don't have a problem with that.
For the planning board's case, we were just talking about this before the meeting started. If there are no issues after this public hearing, the planning board then can call a special meeting in person just to kind of ratify this document for them, and then their September meeting will be able to have that option of whether or not it's fully remote or hybrid.
I think that going forward, we're gonna end up seeing a lot of this hybrid stuff anyway. We do need to have something to guide it, since this isn't gonna end right away.
All right, any other questions, any other comments for public hearing? Mr. Go.
These two documents are the same, right? Just checking.
They're pretty much identical with the exception of references to the planning board and the people.
Right.
All right, so this time I'll declare the public hearing closed, and we'll look for a motion to approve.
I'll make a motion to approve.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second to approve the remote participation policy adopted pursuant to Title I MRS A 403B. Any other questions? Seeing none, all those in favor? All in favor, the motion carries. Thank you. All right, number 2, discuss sidewalks, Middle Houghton, Gray, and I believe part of what.
Yes, the road commissioner is here tonight. We had a chance to talk briefly about this. If you recall, we had this discussion a couple of months ago. If you were to go and take a look at these streets, and I provided you with a little map here in your package to refresh your memory. But these are the streets, they're side streets between Weston Avenue and Madison Avenue. At one time, most of those streets had fully operational sidewalks. 3 of them have deteriorated to the point where they're almost all completely gone and would require a lot of rehab work to bring them back up. At one point, the select board was content to let the road commissioner move forward to remove some of these sidewalks. But now we're brought back to the agenda. The chairman has asked to bring it back to the agenda to talk about what would it cost, what would it look like if the town were to reconstruct all these sidewalks. So with that, I'll turn it over to Jeff.
Yes, the 3 streets, Middle Street, Holton Street, and Gray Street would require extensive rebuilding and the fixing of the driveways that enter into people's homes. Those 3 streets will roughly cost $19,000 a piece. Okay, the section from Vaughn Street, 250 feet north, up Weston Avenue, to remove would roughly cost $6,500, and to rebuild it, $6,800. It's roughly the same to dig that all out as it is to fix it. And you know, that street, that sidewalk dead ends right at the end of Low Street and goes absolutely nowhere else. Some of our other sidewalks are in dire need of repair. Some of the ones that get more used, such as some sections on Main Street. Some of the sidewalks, almost all the sidewalks leading up to Lerner's Lane, where the grade school is, up by the highway garage, is in desperate need of an overlay. The town does have $20,000 that we raised at town meeting that money is appropriated for Madison Avenue from Main Street up to Bean Street, connecting the new sidewalk that's in the process of being built right now. So I guess it's up for discussion of what direction the board wants to head as far as rebuild or remove and grass and loam some of these sidewalks in, or raise the money annually at town meeting specifically for each one of these streets individually.
I think in the past, we addressed this before, and it was the contention that we would do something with sidewalks every year. Having that said, my opinion is that we've got a road commissioner, you know, we'll set aside money to do something every year till we get caught up with this. But he knows the sidewalks better than we do, bringing a recommendation to us where we should be starting and what it's gonna cost us. And we'll address that when it comes budget time. But I think, like I said, I don't know, I don't wanna go up there and say, well, you should do this one or this one, when he knows what the construction is gonna cost to do each one of those. But, you know, probably I would lean towards the ones that aren't too badly broken up before they get worse. I don't know if that would work also.
Well, that's the whole intention of an overlay, such as the case on almost all of Madison Avenue.
Yeah.
Those are in dire need of an overlay right now, which is a lot cheaper than a rebuild, with
Right.
the exception of the one that the north side of the street from Main Street to Bean Street, because a lot of that curb is missing, and that is in dire need of a rebuild. As far as the other ones, the other three that we're discussing here, you know, my recommendation would be to raise the money next year in the 22-23 budget season for Middle Street, then follow down to Holton Street, and then to Gray Street, and raise that money over the course of 3 years, unless you guys decide, or we decided at the budget time to raise $60,000 to repair all those in 1 year. Some of that stuff, most of it will have to be done by a private contractor, only because if we have the time, it takes away from our time of doing roads and getting stuff ready for pavement during the course of the summer, along with vacations and sick days that the crew, you know, takes off during the summer.
And, you know, I firmly think, I mean, to go with a recommendation of the road commissioner, you know the goods, the bads, the ones that needs to be addressed, what it's gonna cost, you know, and then when it comes budget time, you know, if we got a little extra money, which usually isn't the case, you know, we could throw a little extra money in there and address it a little bit more. But as far as anybody else, I don't know who is more qualified than the road commissioner to tell us where the work is needed.
Right, and these three roads, obviously, there's work needed on the sidewalk. It isn't, I mean, there's a lot of grass and a lot of stuff. I would personally like to see us finish or do all three of them at some point. If it's next year, it's next year. I mean, we put all three in the budget together and get them fixed. I think it would be great. I mean, you have on every other street except for Vaughn Street, you have a sidewalk that's going through. I mean, there's a lot of people that walk these streets. I mean, there's a lot of people, and on Middle and Holton and Gray, they end up in the street.
We get plenty of time to put a cost factor together.
I think we've got one though. We got about 55,000.
But I think we're gonna need more
And
than
I do
that.
think probably going up Western Avenue, we probably should just take that out, because I don't think it amounts to anything. Once you get above Vaughn Street, I mean, I don't think that amounts to a whole lot up there. I mean, everybody seems to walk in the road up there. And we're pretty lucky we haven't got somebody run over, but that's, I guess we just knocked on wood, it hasn't happened.
Mr. Goper?
Now, are these gonna be raised sidewalks, or are these just, but right now they're just tar, right?
Well, tar and grass.
Right. But they're not raised, you're not thinking about putting granite in and raising?
No, absolutely not. That just triples the price of the sidewalk. What it would be excavating the existing walkway to a 5-foot sidewalk, and then putting the amount of gravel in to bring it up level with the existing lawns. Something like Bean Street is from Weston Avenue to Madison Avenue.
You just put a hot top over that,
Over,
what's there?
well, the sidewalk, but not the grass strip in the middle. It will look like Bean Street from Madison Avenue to Weston Avenue. That strip of grass between the road and the sidewalk.
So if I'm understanding Jeff correctly, that $19,000 quote is to dig out all the existing material, create a 4 or 5 foot sidewalk, run that asphalt curb that goes out, pack it in with gravel, and pave.
No, there'll be no curb.
No curb on
No
these?
curb. No curb on these 3 streets.
So that 19,000 doesn't include a curb,
No,
like the one on Bean Street has a curb.
it does because we had water issues there.
Okay.
You have the road, you have a grass strip,
Correct?
and you have the sidewalk.
Correct.
So there's a buffer there between the road and the sidewalk.
Yes.
Mr. Manson?
Something you might want to give some thought to is most of those streets have large trees that are just outside of the town right away. And if you go dig into those roots, some of them may extend into the storm drain, which is probably an old clay pipe. So you don't know if you rebuilt one this year, you might not even know until next year or year after that you have damaged some of that clay pipe. You'll end up putting in a storm drain system. So roots could be right in that clay pipe. That clay pipe is awful big.
Yeah, and Mr. Mancher is correct. There are some very large maple trees on every one of those streets, which, when you're digging, it's hard to tell what you're going to run into. The other thing is, too, they will not be maintained in the wintertime. Right now, the sidewalk plow and the man that runs it, we do almost over 12 miles, close to 13 miles of sidewalks in this town. And there's just not enough time in the day to plow every sidewalk in this town. Some of the sidewalks do not get plowed, such as maybe Pine Street, if we have a large storm, until we clean up in the coming days. So just be aware, if those sidewalks do get fixed, they will not be plowed in the wintertime.
Are the others like Bean and?
The other streets, the machine and the operator is at his maximum capacity right now during the snowstorm and in the wintertime.
Do they do Bean?
They do Bean Street, correct. Bean Street and Garfield Street.
Those are the only two?
The only two, Rowell Street gets picked up, it gets cleaned up when it gets picked up in the days after the storm.
No.
Mr. Goldberg?
Now, how come those streets get picked up? There's none down at Old Point here, right, to get picked up?
No.
None. None down here. Okay, so how come those 3 get picked up?
How come what 3?
How come Bean and what was the other?
Well, because there were major arteries to connecting streets. They've always been picked up. There's no rhyme or reason because there were sidewalks on them, and a lot of people in the wintertime do use Garfield and Bean Street to get back and forth. There are people that walk in the wintertime.
Before the elementary school was moved down on Lerner's Lane, it was an access to get people from one side of town to the Western Avenue School. Now it's on Lerner's Lane, it's an avenue to get kids from that side of town over to the elementary school. You do see a lot of kids crossing and walking up Madison Avenue. If I can make a comment, I think from what I talked with Jeff about before, to Mr. Moody's point, we have set aside a very small amount of money each year. You would think $20,000 would get a lot done, but according to this, $20,000 would do one sidewalk. And we have multiple sidewalks that need attention. As we've been able to kind of weather the storm through Madison Paper's closure and all that, and we've been able to catch up on a lot of our outside of town road work that's going to be done, I think in this coming budget, you're going to see more of a focus back on some of the in-town needs. And so I wouldn't be surprised if we put together $100,000 worth of sidewalk projects to bring to the voters this year. And we can probably do that without tilting the balance of what we've been able to bring to the voters for the last couple of years. Just because we don't have as many. River Road is mostly done, Russell Road will be done next year. You know, a lot of those major ones will be pretty much caught up on.
mean, I'd like to see it included if we can get, it to the point where we can accept it. Yes.
I don't have a problem if you got some money left over, do one this fall, if you have time to do it, do the worst one. Get one done anyway.
Well, that's what happened on Bean Street. We had some money left over. Tim and I discussed it. MEW had reset the poles. Now is the perfect time to do this. So, and we had a water issue anyway on that street. So it was the perfect time to spend that extra carry forward money on that street to get it taken care of.
But you still have, you said you have 20,000, you can get one done?
Yes, that was raised at town meeting this year, and that money's appropriated for Madison Avenue from Main Street to Bean Street.
Madison Avenue to Bean
From Main Street to Bean Street.
Between one Madison Avenue and Camp Mills, that way. I think the question, the reason we're having this discussion, I think everybody's in agreement that the road commission does a good job of planning on what projects need to be done. And he and I talk every day. The reason we're talking about this is these three sidewalks have deteriorated to such a point where they don't exist anymore. And so the question was, do we rebuild them, or do we just completely remove them and have grass all the way to the neighbor's lawn? So if that's the will of the board to focus on rebuilding these, then that's something we'll have to live with.
I think it's a good idea. Any other comments?
So we're going to work this into the budget for next year, correct?
I would like to, yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Does the board want to see anything before budget season?
No, I think that's fine.
So but the anticipation is we're going to put a significant amount of sidewalk projects into the budget.
That's the wishes of the board, that's fine.
All right, number 3, discuss matching grant applications. A, Buzzard's Barber Shop.
So at the last meeting, you approved 7 applications for matching grant funds using some of the COVID relief money that we're going to revamp our matching grant program. So before you is a late application from Buzzy the Barber. Buzzy did take out the application. He did not return it by the July 21st deadline. He spoke to me a few days after the fact and said that he had a hard time getting his quotes back, which if you talk to most of the applicants, they have a very difficult time getting quotes. It's just been, that's the state of the business right now. So what Buzzy's project is to replace the glass in his shops on Main Street. It'll do 2 things. It'll help insulate because he'll be replacing it with much more efficient glass, and it'll also improve the look of the facade on the outside. So I bring before you tonight for your consideration, even though the deadline is passed, would you be willing to extend that opportunity to Buzzy if you deem this project worthy of a matching grant? His total project is just under $7,600, so he'd be looking to split $3,795 between what the town pays and what he will pay. I did check with every other person that took out an application, and Buzzy was one of only 2 people that didn't turn back their applications in on time. So we don't have a lot of other ones floating out there that might come and say, oh, you gave Buzzy a special deal, what about me? And I did talk to the one other business that took out an application, and they weren't able to do their project at all till next year, and so they didn't have a problem with this. So I bring that to you to see if you'd like to,
I'll make a motion to grant the extension for Buzzy's Barber Shop to receive the grant money.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second to approve the matching grant application for Buzzy's Barber Shop for $3,795.50. Any other questions? Seeing none, all those in favor? All in favor, the motion carries. All right, and letter B, Boynton's Landscaping.
so back at the last meeting, you did approve the grant application for Boynton's. They were going to purchase some equipment, and they did provide receipts and did show me that equipment has come in. It's a hydro drive aerator. Total price with shipping was $66,5709. The grant was approved for up to $7,000 at 50%, so what I'm bringing to you tonight is, would you authorize payment to Boynton's Landscaping for half of what they paid, so $32,2855.
What did you say, 65?
66,5709.
Half of
Oh, where's my phone?
that. Not back to school yet, but I got that one.
How many math teachers are in there? How many math teachers and bankers are there?
I'm teaching my calculator.
That's why we have them, right?
33, 28,
36.
66,5709, 66,5709, isn't it? 33, I missed it by 100. 33,2855.
All right, so we have a request to pay Boynton's Landscaping $33,2854 for their part of the matching grant. Any motion?
54, 55.
Down on a penny now.
55? 55. All right, so $3,328.55.
I make a motion to pay him.
Thank you.
55.
All right, we have a motion, a second, to pay Boynton's Landscaping $3,328.55 for their part of the matching grant, our part of the matching grant. Any other questions? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? All right, we have 4 in favor, 1 opposed.
I didn't vote for it last time, but I vote for it this time.
Okay, select board's concerns, Mr. Agokian.
Yes, I had one. Last time we talked about the cemeteries, and I got to thinking that one, the Bridge Cemetery, now, can we vote to reopen them and just put in like cremation only and things like this?
So the cemeteries are, those cemeteries that are listed as towns are under the purview of the select board. So the select board can, you don't have to go to town meeting. You can decide at this level whether you want to reopen or allow for certain areas.
Because looking around it every day, I mean, if you cut down the trees, you know what it's like, you've been up there because you cut them down there about 5 years ago or so, whatever it was. And you can get a lot more burials in there if you just use cremation. And there's certain standard size for a lot, or could you take and sell half lots or something like that? With two on it.
Yeah, this is really not in my purview. Danny Carey does most of the lot sales. The only caution I would say, and just be careful how much work you create for Danny. It's easy to handle just one open cemetery in town.
Right.
Right now we have 2, because we have the East Madison Dam cemetery is also open. So if we start opening more and more cemeteries, it does create more work for the office staff. And she may draft you as a lot salesman.
Is that something you want to talk about in September or
Yeah,
October?
can we put that on the agenda?
Probably, yeah. We'll see, either September or October.
Very good. Yeah, let it, Mr. Agokian.
Yeah, that's it.
All right.
One second.
All set? Okay. The only thing I had was, we're gonna start talking in September, probably about the money coming in from the federal government. So, I mean, I don't know, discussion going forward, I mean, we talked about all of our workers and, you know, the good job that they did. I mean, I hope we can put in there maybe some pay for them for all that they did during this period of time out of that money. We realize they were paid each week, but I think we can do a little bit more for that. It would obviously talk about it, I would say. So that's something in September we can also bring up.
My understanding is the state is still waiting to finalize the process for allowing municipalities access to that money. But every time you look at it, it's pretty clear there's 4 only about 4 categories that you can use that money for. But what you just referred to is, in a sense, paying the people that worked for you during the pandemic is certainly a viable category.
You're not including people, like, for example, I'm gonna stay home, and I don't work during that time,
No, ones that work.
and that will
Yep.
get physically there,
Physically there.
not Zoom, but physically.
All right, citizens' concerns. Everybody shaking their heads, I'm gonna move on. Looking for a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Motion and second to adjourn, all those in favor? All in favor, the motion carries, we're adjourned at 7:11.